standing on the promises of Christ my King, through eternal ages and praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Stand we, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Stand we, I'm standing on the promises of God.
Continue our study this morning, Matthew chapter 5, as we continue to work through the Beatitudes. If you haven't been here the last couple of weeks, we've spent quite a bit of time each week talking about introduction to this particular section. And hopefully we're sort of getting instilled in our minds what Jesus is striving to do in what's called the Sermon on the Mount, recorded here in chapter 5, 6, and 7, and also in Luke chapter 6. I encourage you to read that as well. Some differences from one to the other, and obviously Luke doesn't record as much as Jesus does. One of the things that's very interesting, I think, in this study is the fact that Jesus is truly emphasizing the importance of the attitude behind what we do. And it is our attitude that causes us to work and to be involved. And if our attitude isn't what it ought to be, then obviously we're not going to be involved as we ought. Under the Old Testament law, basically you have these same principles found throughout the Old Testament that Jesus mentions here in these first few verses. But they had gotten so caught up, many of them, in the keeping of the law and striving not to break a rule, that they forgot about the real purpose. They were leaving love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness and those things completely out. So the motive was something that they truly were missing. So Jesus, as he instructs them and as he instructs us today, was truly trying to get them to realize that truth was vital and doing what was right was absolutely essential. But if it wasn't done for the right reasons, if we are not here this morning, to show reverence and respect and honor to God, then we're missing the point. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. But each of us need to look within ourselves to see, why do I attend? Why do I come to a Bible class such as this? What is my purpose? Is it to honor God and show reverence to God through my obedience, through my respect? Why do we do the particular things that we're going to do this morning, from Bible study to prayer to the Lord's Supper? Why do we give? Why would we do that? And if our attitude is not in those areas of honor and respect and love for God and wanting to do what God would have us to do, then we're simply going through some motions. Our religion truly becomes very vain. And that's what had happened with many of the Jews of Jesus' day. They were striving to keep the letter of the law, and yet were missing completely the point of why it needed to be done. The word blessed or blessed here suggests that these are attitudes that would put a person in favor with God. So blessed or blessed, Beatitudes, the attitude that we have, if it is proper, if it is an attitude that's poor in spirit. We talked about the humility, not letting the pride and self-righteousness dominate. If we are that type of people that would mourn over bad things, over sinful things, over wicked things that we find in our lives and in the world, then we're going in the right direction. And those are the two that we've looked at already. Anybody with a thought, comment, question, down to, what are we ready for, verse 5, I guess, in Matthew chapter 5. Okay, of course here he deals with those that are meek. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What's the definition of meekness? Humble? I think it's tied into there, yeah. What? Gentle? Yeah. Now that's probably getting more towards the idea. There's a statement made about a meek man, or the meekest man in the Old Testament. You remember who that was? It was Moses. Okay? Moses is referred to as a very meek man. But when you think about the kind of person he was a very strong person, wasn't he? He was a person that would powerfully deal out correction and discipline. So I've heard this definition that meekness is strength under control. It doesn't mean that a person is some sort of a mousy type, a person that maybe would let everybody run over him or her. But it's this idea of gentleness. You sort of picture this maybe with a big old rough man with calluses on his hands, and you can tell from his face that he's out in the weather and all, and he's standing there and he's holding a little baby. And you can see the gentleness in his face and in his expression as he looks at that child. So you got the power and you got the strength, but there is this gentle attitude that is there as well. So here he emphasizes the need for that. Why do you think that it is so important, and why do you think that we need to be reminded of that? Yep. So without meekness, we're probably not going to be the kind of servants as far as serving others. You're exactly right. What else? Yeah. No question about it. I think that's involved. In fact, all of these kind of go together. So when you're talking about humility, compassion, gentleness, all this stuff all kind of flows together. You're exactly right. And without meekness, probably not going to be a lot of compassion. What else? What I think about in reference to this is that we live in a world where we can get pretty callous. We hear so much bad. And if we're not very careful, it's just another story. Even in our congregation, with our announcements, as we announce the people that are sick and the surgeries and all those types of things, if we're not careful, that may be as far as it goes. We hear it, and every once in a while when we'll make an announcement about a young person maybe getting killed in an accident, or somebody that's diagnosed with terrible cancer, you can just hear the groans in the congregation, as we hear it, and it's obviously that we're touched. But do we go beyond that? Do we actually visit? Do we actually call? Do we actually, write a note? Do we actually, prepare food? It would seem to me that if we're not real careful, those types of things may become so routine, and we may think that something ought to be done, but not me. Somebody else is going to visit. Somebody else is going to call. Somebody else is going to check on that person. So to me, this gentleness, compassion, actually doing something is as a result of us thinking properly and maintaining these particular attitudes. If we're not careful, we can get in the habit of coming here and sitting here and studying and listening, but it doesn't go beyond that. As Sebron was saying, it doesn't really translate into actually visiting the neighbor. It doesn't translate into actually, preparing food or going by the funeral home or going to the nursing home. And we may be more like these Jews were, preaching it, teaching it, defending it, but not living it in our daily lives. And I think that when you think about this humility and like we talked last week, what is it that bothers us? What is it that really puts a tear in our eyes? If we have a big scratch down the side of our car, some of us are just ready to fall to pieces, But then we hear about somebody down the street dying in an accident, and we think, well, that's too bad. So we're more upset over the car and a scratch on the car than we are about, the death. And especially, we should be concerned, obviously, if folks are not Christians and not living the way that they ought to live. Anybody else with a thought there? Excuse me? Selfishness. You probably, maybe you remember me saying or not, but and I think that's an excellent point. I'm convinced that if you want to look at what's behind almost any sin you can think of that we do, it's selfishness. Why do we lie? Well, it's to get out of doing something we don't want to do, or to try to keep from getting in trouble or whatnot. Why would we do this or that is sinful? More times than not, it's selfishness. You're exactly right. Yep. But sometimes we want it, right? And it's thinking of ourselves and maybe never thinking about the person that doesn't have anything at all, right? And getting our mind off of ourselves. So, and I think what we're developing here, hopefully, is causing all of us to realize that so much of everything centers on attitude. You've got to have an attitude of compassion and love and understanding, or else we'll not get up and do. We'll be pretty selfish. We're going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what makes me feel good. I'm going to do what is comfortable rather than going beyond that, to serve. Sonny, you started to say something? Yeah, same thing. Okay, so, well, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the roof is about to fall in. You and Sonny both thinking the same way here. We're getting the point, though, aren't we? We're getting the point. Okay? Yeah, somebody that would take a second place. They say that the most difficult In an orchestra or a band, the most difficult position to get somebody to serve in is second fiddle. Okay, and I imagine that would apply to whatever. But I know in the band they'll have first chairs, don't they, Laura? First chair, second chair, third chair. Of course, everybody likes to be first chair, right? As a rule. But to get that second, that third chair to really perform and to do their very best is a challenge. We're that way, aren't we? We like being number one. And obviously, as Christians, that's not going to work. We have to put others before ourselves. So selflessness, selfishness, those ideas. And again, it's an attitude. It is an attitude of service and doing unto others as we'd have them do unto us, but doing unto others even if they don't do unto us. Right? Yeah. What is the little adage about walking in the other person's shoes? That's challenging for us to do that, and for us to try to feel their hurt and to feel their pain. Paul in Romans says, rejoice with those that rejoice and learn to weep with those that weep. And again, that takes a selfless attitude in order for us to do that. Anybody else there? Sure, I agree. I think, that prayer is vital, and the Bible teaches that for us to pray for one another, pray without ceasing. And I tell you what prayer does. Prayer obviously brings a person up before God, but if we're talking about a person in prayer, we're more likely to do something for that person as well, because they're on our mind, they're on our hearts, and they're on our thoughts. Now, there may be situations where maybe that's all we can do because of the circumstance or where the person is or what the problem is. And yet, it's a little bit like putting things on your refrigerator that you want to remember. And I know some, we'll put that prayer list up there on the refrigerator so that you're reminded to pray. But prayer is a motivator. It takes things to God, but it also keeps things in my mind so that I don't forget to do what I need to do as well. Anybody else? Yeah. So what's it doing? It's helping with our attitude, isn't it? And helping with our attitude, which is what this is all about. Notice it says that the meek, they shall inherit the earth. I'm not exactly sure what all of that means, but I think it has to do with spiritual enrichment, not that you're going to have a lot of property and that type of thing. Maybe this idea that the earth will be in proper perspective. If we're meek and we're gentle and we have that attitude, we'll realize that this everything that we have belongs to God. And we're simply stewards of it, and we will have control of it in the sense that it does not control us. Does that make sense? Material things are not bad things as long as we control them and they don't control us, right? Money is not a bad thing at all as long as we control it and use it for the glory of God. But if it starts controlling us, and we do what we do and don't do what we don't do because we're so in love with the earth, we're so in love with money that we allow it to lead us away from God. So at least that's the idea that I think of when I think of this. Somebody have a different perspective there on what he means by that? Right. Mm-hmm. And he goes on in this sermon to talk about that here a little bit later. It tells us not to worry over those things, not to be. It's a good point. Yes. Right. The peace, the contentment. Actually, I got that passage noted here too. Psalm 37, verse 9, verse 11, and verse 29, all in that 37th Psalm. I've also got this point, Acts chapter 3. In Acts chapter 3, beginning with verse 19, Peter says, "Repent therefore and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, so that times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord." So, by repentance and that type of thing, there is refreshing. There's something that God gives us. And that he may send Jesus Christ, who was preached to you before, whom heaven must receive until the times of restoration of all things that God has spoken by the mouth of all of his holy prophets since the world began. So the meek obviously are going to be penitent individuals. This earth and the physical things are going to be enjoyed much more by people that are not controlled by it. So again, I think maybe that idea of inheritance in reference to the fact that we realize that we're blessed to have and to use these old things, but we're not controlled by these old things, and we realize that they're going to come and they're going to go. So I have possession, I have control. If my house burns down, it's sad, but that's not going to rock my world, you see, because I realize that it wasn't mine anyway, and God just gave it to me, and God's not going to let me, not have what I need. When all's said and done, it's sort of about like the 50 pairs of shoes. Do I need them? No. God may have blessed me, but yes, ma'am. Verse 9, verse 11, and verse 29. And Psalm, yeah. I think they all kind of relate to what James was bringing up there, and it's a good point. Also, I think there's a passage at 1 Peter 3. See what 1 Peter 3 and verse 4 says, "Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine raiment." Now here he's talking particularly to the wives or to the ladies. But what's he saying? He's saying that real life and real beauty is inward. That the outward things may make us look a little better and smell a little better and be more presenting, but real life is where it's in the heart, isn't it? It's in the soul, it's in the spirit. And a person that is meek and gentle and understanding and compassion realizes that what really matters is that relationship with God. And in that sense, we are in control. We are in possession of stuff. Stuff is not in possession of us. And I think that's what he's getting at. We may come up, if you continue to study that and you come up with another idea, be glad to hear from you. Okay, verse 6, talking about those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Here's one I think a little easier for us to understand. He's talking about passionate searchers. And really, those are the only ones that really are going to be satisfied. If we're casual in it, if we're not really sincere in our hungering and our thirsting after righteousness, that which is right, then we're not going to be satisfied with those things. So, here he challenges us, and I think he was challenging his audience there, that there was the need for a continued search for what was right, continually looking at themselves, continually evaluating, and to seek what it is that God would have us to do. And in the process of that, we are going to be more gentle and more humble, and have these. Notice you can't separate these things. A person that's got one is going to have the others of these. Now, they may be by degree. One person may be more meek. Another person may be more humble. One person may have more of a burning desire to seek righteousness than the other. But all of these go together. And it's only when we're truly, digging in to God's Word and truly trying to live it and to constantly check ourselves that we will be satisfied with what we have. Look at, stay here in the sermon, but over in chapter 7 and verse 7. Very familiar passage. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and he who knocks it will be open. And so here is a passage that encourages us to seek, to knock, to ask. So if we really want to know what's right, and if we really want to do what's right, God's going to help us to be able to discover that. He's going to bless us to be able to know what we need to do. So in that sense, we are going to be filled. God is not going to leave us on the outside not knowing what we ought to do and how we ought to live and how we ought to act. Indeed, we will be filled, and there will be a peace, I think, that comes with that, in knowing that we are doing what God wants us to do, and at the same time, we're not so self-righteous, but what we recognize our own weaknesses, so we continue to look, we continue to study, and we recognize that all of us can learn every day and do better in the future than we've done in the past. Comment stops there. Exactly. And again, as we noted, these things go together. All of this ties together in reference to the fact that just doing what's right is not enough, but it's doing what's right for the right reasons. And he says if we are seeking that righteousness, obviously a bad attitude is not right. Okay? So you tie the two together to help us to become the kind of people that we want to be. And God is saying that we can do that if we want to. We shall be fed. We shall be filled. God will help, regardless of what it is, whether it's a bad temper, whether it's pride, whatever. It's a calloused heart that's become hardened with life. Whatever the problem is, God will help us to deal with that if we'll let it. and it's based upon our willingness to want to do what's right and allow Him to help us and guide us in those areas. Anybody else? Okay, verse 7, the merciful. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. You know, here it sounds a little bit like what Jesus said in reference to forgiveness. As we forgive others their trespasses, He'll do what? He'll forgive us our trespasses, right? So how do we gain mercy? We never will get to the point of deserving God's grace and God's mercy. Mercy comes upon those that are undeserving. And He's teaching us to try to be God-like, that we need to be merciful. And one of the reasons that we should be merciful is because we surely need it. You know, why should I be forgiven to you? Because I need it so badly, right? You know, why should you be loving? Because you need love so badly. Why do I need to be compassionate? Because, oh God, what can I do without God's compassion? Why do I need to be patient? What God wasn't patient with us? We'd all be gone, right? And there wouldn't be none of us left. You know, if God was patient and long-suffering, so merciful. Now, and this is not, or should not go to a selfish degree. We don't do it just because we can't do without it. You know, we don't want to get in this idea of loving others because others love us, but we need to recognize and understand that we are pitiful and undone and helpless without the mercy and grace of God. And as a result of that, we need to be merciful to those that we're dealing with. We need to practice forgiveness. We need to practice compassion and recognize that there's a profit there in that. As we would give and as we would love and be merciful, we are then greater recipients of God's love and God's mercy as a result of that. Anybody with a thought there? Mm-hmm. Well, it comes back to attitude, right? The attitude, and I guess that's the whole point of, now, does that mean that we'll always be this to the degree that we ought? No. Have you ever come to worship and maybe you didn't feel good, maybe there were issues, maybe there were problems, maybe with the marriage or with the kids or with the job, and you realize that you just wasn't in much mood to be here, but you came anyway. And in the process of singing and prayers, you left feeling better. The attitude got there. Okay? So now I think that does happen. Sometimes we just have to force ourselves to do what needs to be done until things get better. Sometimes our mind has to catch up with our actions, okay? But the bottom line is, if I've gotten into a rut of just doing it without doing it for the right reasons, I need to really check my heart. Yes, ma'am. Yep. And we have to recognize that to preach it, proclaim it, needs to be done. But at the same time, it is our actions that tell us, our words come from our heart, right? And our actions come forth from the heart. And so The words and the actions have to go together. They have to work together. Anybody else with a thought there? Yeah. Could be. Yeah, and to be merciful, to prefer mercy over judgment. Got a little side note here, and God prefers mercy over judgment. So mercy sets forth an attitude towards other people. It also, I think, helps us with some balance there. We don't become so judgmental. We don't become so self-righteous. We recognize that the only way that we're going to get to heaven is through the grace and mercy of God, and thus we're much more forgiving and understanding and patient with one another as we all strive. And a point that I'm feebly trying to make there is that it's a struggle. It's a struggle for us to do what's right. It's also a struggle for us to think about that and do what is right. There will be times when we will, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but it happened to me last week. I knew I needed to go by the nursing home, but in all honesty, I didn't really want to go. At that point, I really didn't need to, see a lot of sick folks. But I went, and I was blessed. Because I was the one that was lifted up. I was the one that was encouraged. So I finally got my heart right, So there is a blending there, I think, of actions and words. And we have to fight that battle to continually think right and do what's right. They both go together. Okay, we'll take up that next one, verse 8, pure in heart, hopefully next week, and we'll ease on through this. Appreciate your comments this morning.